Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your weekly recap brought to you by VGR. It is Jacob Smith and Matt Morgans.
Hello.
Back as usual to our weekly schedule after the chaos, the absolute insanity that was E3. We
Yes.
wrapped up our conference wrap up videos. You can go check those out on the channel. But to dive right into it, we will be doing one final E3 recap, and that is kind of going over all of our predictions that we made just before E3 went live. Matt, you fared pretty well. I don't really want to talk about my results.
I didn't get everything right.
Certainly more than me, but granted, I think a toddler could have gotten better than I did. So Matt, what was your first prediction, and did you get it right?
Well, no, to be honest, the first prediction was one of the ones I really didn't get right. And to be fair, I think it was more one of my more hopeful predictions rather than necessarily a realistic prediction, which was that we'd get more information about Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, yeah.
I think they did appear at E3, but they didn't make any presentations or announcements. I think they were just sort of at the event.
Yeah.
We didn't get any
just
gameplay.
their showface.
We didn't really get any new information beyond what had been shown in the announcements ahead of E3. And it now looks like what they probably did was what a few different companies did ahead of E3, which was to quickly get trailers out before the event so that they could get attention before the deluge of news at E3.
Of course.
That's certainly a sensible idea, but it certainly looks like they aren't ready to show anything else yet. So unfortunately, that one didn't come true.
And that's totally fair. I think, show us when it's ready. My first prediction was actually one that I got right, and I feel really good about it. I knew that we were going to get some new Animal Crossing Switch details, because how are we not going to? It'd been since September since we got that little teaser, but more accurately, I predicted that we were most likely going to look for a 2020 release date for the next Animal Crossing, and sure enough, they had delayed the game from a general 2019 announcement to March of 2020 for Animal Crossing New Horizons. And I feel really good about that one, not only because I get to get my hands on the game soon, relatively soon anyway, which of course I'm excited about, but that I got a prediction right. And let's just end the list there, because that's all you need to really hear about my predictions.
My second prediction was that we would get more. We would get proper gameplay for Control, and we'd also get a release date. And what do you know? We got quite a significant amount of gameplay, and we got a release date. So that one was very good, very accurate. And yeah, it looks really great from what they've shown, because prior to E3 we really hadn't seen much at all of gameplay. It looks pretty similar to what I had kind of envisioned that the game would look like, but there's some interesting things that they're doing there with weaponry, and we got a bit more of a hint at the story, and there's some really interesting twists in the story as well. So I'm definitely even more excited to get my hands on Control when it does come out.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always excited to see what the guys at Remedy are up to. So, looking forward to Control as well. My second prediction was not as accurate as yours. I thought we'd get at least a little something, a tidbit, a 10-second teaser trailer, something more on the next Dragon Age. Because I figured it's been a while since Inquisition, despite the problems that development has had, as reported, en masse, following Anthem's blunder. I thought we'd get a little something. I thought we'd get something at all, but it turns out, no, we did not. They're still working on it. I'm fine with not getting a look at it. I'm just unhappy that my prediction was wrong, which is a common theme you'll see in my list, unfortunately for me.
Well, to be fair, if I had made a prediction about Dragon Age, I probably would have said something similar. I certainly was hoping to see something, especially after they released a teaser for it at the Game Awards. But it seems like maybe Anthem has kind of thrown a wrench into the works over at BioWare. So hopefully the game is still in development. But I guess we'll have to wait and see about that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But moving into to your third pick, again, another one that you seem to have gotten right. Matt, give it to me. I'll pretend like I'm not jealous.
To be fair, this was one of my safest predictions, and I would say in general yours were a little bit more out there than mine were.
Yeah.
But this was that we'd actually get more information about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now, obviously, we should probably clarify, Star Wars wasn't actually at E3, in inverted commas, it was at EA Play, which was, for all intents and purposes, for anyone who is not actually a member of EA or the E3, operational team, the first day of E3. Like, the gaming audience, that was the first day of E3. I'm pretty sure most people didn't even realize it was a separate event.
Yeah, pretty much.
And yes, we did get a lot of new information about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. We already knew we were going to get gameplay, so I didn't predict that. And we already knew what the release date was, so again, that wasn't a prediction. I made a variety of predictions, just kind of saying maybe we'll get more information about where the game sits into the canon, where the maybe an average game length, something like that. We did get a lot of new information. We didn't necessarily get everything that I'd specifically referred to, but it was a safe prediction. So I'd say I maybe got it ish.
Yeah, I mean, we know that it's canon now, so that's at least one thing.
That's a good point. We do.
Yeah. My third prediction was that we would see some Fable, which I really thought this would be the perfect time for Playground, the guys behind Forza Horizon, to unveil their new project, which everyone knows is Fable. Yeah, it hasn't been, of course, outright announced. But alas, we got nothing. And that's a little disappointing, especially because this is supposed to be such a big E3 for Microsoft. I mean, it was a big E3 for Microsoft, but it would have been the perfect time for us to see some new Fable.
Yeah, it was a big E3, or a good E3 for Microsoft, I should say. It wasn't a very big E3 overall. A lot of companies didn't make appearances this year.
Definitely.
And I honestly don't know if that's just because those companies don't have much to show, or they decided not to attend the event. But I have a very strong suspicion that one of the reasons why this was quite a quiet E3 is because there's a new console generation coming next year.
That's what I'm thinking. People are already getting their dev kits and working on the next gen titles.
I'm sure there's a lot of studios who are working on games who are now, waiting for a new console launch so that they can launch their new titles alongside the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this year is a little bit early.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think 2020 we'll see some more big reveals. Matt, your second to last prediction, again, came true, gritting my teeth.
Yes, so obviously we knew Borderlands 3 was going to be a big deal at E3 this year, and they were indeed, but what I'd predicted more specifically was that we would get a dedicated story trailer, because up until E3 we'd only gotten gameplay trailers. And we did basically get a dedicated story trailer. It was still quite vague about the story, but it did focus much more on at least the kind of premise, and also it introduced the villainous faction. Previously, I think they had been named, but there was nothing actually known about them. Now we do know who they are and a little bit about them.
Yeah, the Calypso twins.
Well, I was thinking more of, we'd known about them before, but their faction, the Children of the Vault, I think they're called.
Yes, that's right.
Which I think we knew the name, but we didn't really know anything about them. Now we've got a bit more info. And yeah, also in that trailer, we discussed what might have been in the trailer, and you suggested that Claptrap would probably make an appearance, and I said, oh, but he's got a new voice actor, so I bet they don't put him center stage. I bet they'll put him at the back, and they'll have another character, maybe one of the original Vault Hunters, who people are more familiar with. and could not have been more spot on.
Sure enough.
They did have Lilith as the primary narrator, obviously was one of the original Vault Hunters, and Claptrap was in the trailer for all of 3 seconds.
So kudos to you, Matt, for showing me up once again.
Yes.
Big E3 for Jacob, as you can tell. My fourth prediction was that there would be no Splinter Cell, and sure enough, there was no Splinter Cell. I think this is probably my safest, besides maybe Animal Crossing, my safest prediction.
I feel like this was a bit safer.
Yeah, definitely. But people have been throwing it around like, ooh, maybe Splinter Cell, ooh, maybe Splinter Cell. So I decided to shut it down. And Matt, your final prediction of E3, throw it at me. You probably got it right.
The prediction I made initially was to do with Cyberpunk 2077, and it was that we would get we would get the quote unquote Cyberpunk 2077 release date. Now then, we went on to discuss what we might actually get as that release date, and so we were partly right, partly wrong. So we said that we would probably not get a specific release date. We thought that we'd maybe get a month, but more likely we'd get like a release season, coming spring 2020 or something like that. And then with much fanfare, CD Projekt Red announced an exact release date. So we weren't quite right about that one. They're definitely a bit more confident than we thought they would be. And we were very close with the release date. Obviously, we didn't specify an exact date, but we were very close with the timing, because we were saying kind of end of Q4 2019, which would have been around about March, and the game's coming out in mid-April, so we're very close.
I'll give us a half point for that one. That's pretty good. And my final prediction was definitely my most out there prediction. I thought that we'd see more from Ken Levine's new game studio, Ghost Story Games. I thought this would be a great time for them to show us what they've got after their kind of 2-year dormancy after his departure from Irrational in 2017. Yeah. But alas, we got nothing. So the man himself, the creator of BioShock, remains silent.
I think that could be an instance again of the upcoming new console generation. Some of those smaller studios are probably looking to the next console generation as a potential marketing opportunity.
Very possible.
Are probably designing for that kind of release.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there you have it. The recap of our E3 predictions. Some were great, some were mine.
They were a mixed bag, to be sure.
2020, I'm coming out strong. But we've got some other news, and some news it is. Matt, did you know that loot boxes aren't loot boxes?
So I've been told by EA's legal team.
Oh yeah! Wow, me too. That's crazy. Yes, EA are trying to rebrand loot boxes as, get this, surprise mechanics. Wow, that's so much fun.
It's
Hopkins,
honestly just a surprise how ethical they are.
Quite ethical, I might add. Kerry Hopkins, who's the Vice President of Legal and Governmental Affairs at EA, testified in front of the UK Parliament, a small panel of the UK Parliament, and she had some interesting things to say regarding loot boxes. When asked about the ethical implications of loot boxes and how they're implemented in games, she said, and I quote, "We do think the way we've implemented these kinds of mechanics is quite ethical and quite fun." Matt, I am one to think that you are inclined to disagree with this.
Well, I'm inclined to think that if you have to say something is quite ethical, that it may not actually be ethical.
It feels like a bit of a caveat, doesn't it?
I feel like the word ethical isn't something that should come in degrees. I think it should be ethical, and I think they know that it's not, or at the very least that a lot of people don't think that it is, and that it's a pretty grey area even at the best of times. They've clearly failed to convince anyone on social media or in the gaming media, or probably in the media overall. My only concern is whether they actually convinced anyone in the committee. Because
of course, that's what matters.
At the end of the day, governmental committees, particularly where they are concerned with technology, don't always have the same views as the rest of the public who are actually familiar with these things. And I wouldn't expect people to really know much about the committee that this was happening in front of. It was Parliament's Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee, so it's a pretty broad sort of set of topics that they're in charge of. So I would not have expected any of them to be experts on loot boxes or this issue. I mean, I would like to hope that they did actually read up on the topic. It's a mix of people on the committee, which is probably a good sign. But the committee chair is a Conservative, so it really wouldn't surprise me if he really didn't know what he was talking about, or that he just took the side of the corporation, because at the end of the day, that is what they tend to do.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is, like you kind of mentioned, what'll be interesting and what'll really matter is that we got to kind of see if Parliament and the government listens to the media, because if you tune into literally anyone involved with gaming or games journalism, you'll see them crying absolute horse hockey. Like, this is like everyone is decrying these statements because they know they're absolutely either false or deliberately misleading. And what worries me is we've kind of seen a certain level of incompetence from our government here in the U.S. when it comes to matters of technology and how it works. Like, people having, like, Mark Zuckerberg literally having to explain to members of the government during his testimony during the Facebook trials how Google and Google searches work. Like the most basic thing you could have easily looked up when you were going to take a testimony from Mark Zuckerberg, and you didn't look it up. So I think that pattern of behavior and of lack of research is worrisome. But if they're in tune enough with the community, with any digital community at all, they will clue into the fact that everyone's calling EA out.
Hopefully
right now.
So.
Yeah. Because these are deliberately, like I said, false and misleading statements. And Hopkins even tried to kind of shrug off the fact that countries like Belgium have outright outlawed loot boxes by saying, oh, that's just their interpretation of the law. And
but they're desperate that doesn't become a precedent that everyone starts following. So they want to portray it as a sort of random outlier rather than a sensible decision.
Well, my favorite, and I say that with just a bitter taste in my mouth, favorite part of this was that Hopkins tried to directly compare loot boxes to Kinder Eggs and toys like Hatchimals, saying that the surprise mechanics are present in both, which is, again, so deliberately misleading. I mean, there isn't a $60 entry fee to get a Kinder Egg.
Indeed. So.
And there aren't sights and sounds deliberately associated with dopamine receptors in Kinder Eggs, right? Like, kids don't pop those open, and boom, a flurry of flashing lights and sounds meant to please their brains goes off. But these things are prevalent in gaming, in loot boxes. I mean, even in the free-to-play model, you see loot boxes being used as a maybe necessary but still predatory means of getting money from the consumer, because it's something like 70% of purchases made from a profit made from loot boxes comes from a very, very minuscule, like sub 10% of players, because it is that minor percentage that gets hooked, that keeps spending and keeps spending and keeps spending, and EA knows that.
Also, just an amusing point. Maybe not the best thing to point to comparing loot boxes to Kinder Eggs, given that Kinder Eggs are in fact banned in the US. So maybe not necessarily the comparison you want to draw to your own product.
Yeah, it's not exactly the strongest argument to make.
No.
But EA is definitely feeling the pressure, especially with the bipartisan support that Senator Josh Hawley here in the States is garnering by trying to ban or limit microtransactions and loot boxes in games. So we'll see how they really attempt to respond to this. But clearly, if Hawkins' statements to Parliament are any indicator, it's going to be with deliberately underhanded tactics.
Yeah.
And I don't think we expected anything different. But Matt, I know you've got some updates regarding Apex Legends. Speaking of EA games including loot boxes.
Well, in this case, it's actually less negative news.
Yeah.
And this is the news that Respawn have kind of come out and said that they have no plans to ever make an Apex Legends sequel, an Apex Legends 2.
That's interesting.
And it's not because they don't see that the game they don't see the game having a future. They very much do see it having a future, but they don't see it in the sense of iterative game releases. They see it as a sort of a live content platform in a similar way to games like Rainbow Six Siege.
Yeah.
So the who was it? Who said? Drew McCoy, executive producer of Apex Legends, said, "We're never going to make an Apex 2," but he said he was hoping that Season 72 would be awesome, because that's how they're thinking about it. They're thinking about it in terms of seasonal content updates and content releases, and just kind of doing something similar to what Fortnite's doing, but at less of a breakneck pace. Not pushing their entire staff to work crunch all the time. As they've covered in previous public statements. But yeah, it's interesting to see them going into this route.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think setting the game up for success like this and being very transparent about it from the start is really important. Because like you said, this model has worked really well for a game like Rainbow Six Siege, which has evolved so drastically from what it was released as. And I think Apex, as a free-to-play game, has even more wiggle room to do some really cool evolutions of how they've done things. And as a direct competitor to Fortnite, like you said, they're not working at such a breakneck pace like Epic has been forcing their employees to do for quite some time now. And I think that will only kind of benefit them in the long run, because they'll see, as crunch continues to be more and more exposed in the industry, they'll garner that respect and support from their fan base and have a really core, loyal fan base.
Yeah.
And I don't think this, to me, says we are committed to making this current game as great as possible. I think already looking to sequels at this point would say, okay, they've already kind of abandoned Apex 1. And saying, no, we're doubling down on Apex Legends. That's it. There is no 1 because there's no 1, 2. There's no 2 and 3. It's just Apex Legends. I think that is hugely beneficial for their brand as a whole.
Definitely. And it certainly shows that Respawn's planning on Apex Legends being a long-term revenue-generating project. And it kind of lends a bit more support to, if you recall a few months ago, there were a lot of stories about, and I suspect we probably discussed it in a past episode of the podcast, about how Apex Legends, things like Twitch viewing ratings were dropping sharply following its big surge after launch.
Yeah.
But what we've really seen is that drop, which was certainly to be expected after its enormous sort of unexpected rise, has really started to stabilize. And we're now, I think, getting to see about what the game's average audience really is in terms of there being a long-term audience. And I think now that Respawn and EA are a bit more aware of those figures, they can start to kind of focus on how much they're going to devote to their content schedule. So I think for them to come out and say, they're very much devoted to a long-term commitment to Apex, I think shows that they're confident that they can sustain and maybe grow those numbers in the future.
Yeah.
Because
I think...
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned Apex being a great long-term revenue generator, and I hope that it continues to be that, because then it potentially frees Respawn up to do more cool things, like what they're doing with Fallen Order, no microtransactions, single player only, no loot boxes, things like that. I think if EA sees that, because we've heard time and time again that EA asks, what's your version of Ultimate Team going to be? If Respawn's version of Ultimate Team is just consistently going to be Apex, then that frees them up to do a whole lot of other stuff.
For sure.
Titanfall 3. But that's really cool news, and it's encouraging to see them thinking about their different properties like that, and very strategically, very smartly. I think that shows that they're maximizing the most with their out of their partnership with EA, and hopefully we can just see Respawn continue to grow and expand and find the same success that games like Rainbow Six Siege have found.
Hopefully so, yeah.
And that's going to wrap it up for our typical news section. We've got a little segment coming up with our very own David Gill, where I sat down with him to talk about his E3 experience at his second E3, first ever representing VGR. So check that out. But for now, I've been Jacob Smith.
And I'm Matt Morgans.
And we'll see you in the next segment. Hello everyone, and welcome to the second segment of this episode of the VGR Weekly Recap. I am here with VGR's very own David Gill.
Hey everybody.
Who was there at E3 2019, soaking in all the crazy energy, all the big announcements of the conference. So David, I've got a few questions for you. This was your second E3, right?
Yeah, so this is my second one, but my first one is media.
Okay, nice. So what was your experience like being there, writing for the site, being there specifically as a media representative?
Yeah, it was a bit of an adjustment because a lot of appointments, like, back-to-back. Definitely, I didn't really have to, like, wait in, like, too many lines, but compared to, like, last year.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I was, like, pretty, like, chill and laid back, and yeah, I mean...
That's cool.
And I got to see more stuff, which was really cool. Like, I saw like 23 games in total, like more than last year. So
that's cool.
It's more of a bigger opportunity to like see more stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It really increases your scope of the conference, I'd imagine. I mean, I'm personally incredibly jealous that you got to go. It's a really cool experience that I haven't gotten the opportunity to have yet. But since I haven't been able to go, I've got some burning questions for you that me and Matt have put together. First of all, what was your favorite moment of the entire show? What was the thing that you saw personally that really sparked joy?
Oh man,
it was a lot. I know.
I mean, there wasn't like as much. I mean, in terms of like a moment where I like actually freaked out was at the Xbox conference.
Yeah.
When Keanu Reeves showed up.
Yeah.
Like, everyone in that room had a heart attack. Like, I kind of had a heart attack. That was cool.
I had a heart attack just sitting there on my living room couch. Like, I can't imagine. That's awesome. So you were there at the Xbox conference.
Yeah. So, we had pretty good seats. So, yeah, I mean, that was, like, really cool to, like, actually just, like, see that up close. It was so cool.
That is awesome. That's really cool. So the vibe in that room, I imagine, it was palpable even from my couch. Sitting there, did you really understand why the media went absolutely crazy after the event?
Yeah, I could see it a little bit. I mean, I personally think that might be like one of my favorite conferences like of this year, but I think that's partly because I was there. So I got to like feel the energy of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could definitely just feel like the excitement like throughout and like even like a little bit after.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So what was one thing that you were expecting to see at the entire event of E3 that you didn't get a chance to see, or that wasn't shown by any of the conferences?
That wasn't shown?
Yeah. Or anything that you expect to see maybe more of.
I don't know. I kind of wish that I had seen maybe... Because I feel like this year, like, I got to see pretty much everything that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one game that I would just love to see more of is, like, stuff like Watch Dogs, Legion, or, like, or Cyberpunk. I did not get enough of either of those.
Yeah.
Or even stuff like or even stuff like Link's Awakening. I mean, that was really cool, and like Luigi's Mansion. Those are kind of like up there for me. And also Doom Eternal. I love Doom Eternal. Like I played that for like 20 minutes, and I needed more.
That's cool. So as far as Doom Eternal goes, because I have a personal kind of interest in that, do you think, from what you experienced, did it differ enough from Doom 2016 to feel to warrant a new entry into the franchise?
Oh yeah, I think it like. Playing it still feels like the 2016 remake, but with just more like gameplay features like added in. Like I think there's like some new like weapons, and like it's definitely like feels a lot faster than than I remember from the first one. And there's like a new like grappling hook I think you can use.
Yeah, I saw that.
There's stuff like that makes it like still feel like the 2016, but which is more like helps more with like maneuvering like around like around the game.
That's really cool. So you mentioned Watch Dogs Legion. Was there anything particularly that impressed you about that game and what they were doing with it?
I mean, I remember that during that presentation they were just talking about like the attention to detail, like in how they created London, and I'm just like, geez, like I've been there once, and that like I can still remember stuff. I'm like, oh, like I went there. But also just like the fact that you can control any citizen in the game, like the amount of like time that must have taken those developers to do. I'm sure I would have exploded if that were me.
Yeah, I know. It seems like quite the undertaking for sure.
But that demo was like 20 minutes long. It was like a 20-minute presentation, and just seeing that like up close, I'm just like I needed to see more. I'm just like so like fascinated by like how they even like made that work, because it seems to have worked pretty well.
Yeah,
I would have loved to see more of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting mechanic, and Matt and I kind of touched on the fact that we hope that it is diverse enough and in-depth enough to really keep us going, because we can definitely see how the mechanic could become stale if there are too many repeated backstories, or if the recruitment missions are too similar. And from what we've heard from people who got hands-on with the game, it seems like we're not really clear on whether that could be the case or not. But I hope it's as cool as it appeared to be, because I remember watching that feeling really excited that they were at least trying to do something really different with the franchise.
Yeah, it was definitely a different take. I haven't really played the first one in years, and I've never played Watch Dogs 2, but playing this one makes me want to go back and play Watch Dogs 2. But yeah, I couldn't really tell either if the citizens are different enough or not, if they're all like just kind of repetitive. I couldn't really tell from my demo either if it was just like repeats of each other.
Of course. As far as E3, what do you think next year will bring? Because obviously this year we got the big, quote unquote big Scarlet reveal, which everyone kind of knew was coming. It matched the specs more or less of the PS5. So what do you think that 2020 is going to bring? Do you think it's going to be even bigger than this year?
I could see it happening. Something that I had wondered, I'm like, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, is with Google kind of having like a bigger presence, like trying to make a bigger presence with Stadia. If maybe they would have a booth or something next year, that would be pretty interesting. Or if maybe PlayStation comes back and that'll be like a full showcase of like Scarlet, and like the PS5 maybe. Maybe just PlayStation coming back to the show, because I could definitely feel like their absence, like when I was there a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, even Xbox's Phil Spencer voiced his disappointment that they weren't there, and everyone kind of felt their absence, even their direct competition. So I think that's pretty telling of how big people want E3 2020 to be, and it certainly seems like they're gearing toward the next big push for consoles, especially because we know that Scarlet's coming in holiday 2020. I'm assuming that the PS5 will probably come around that same time, and E3 2020 would be the perfect place to kind of unveil that and build up hype. As far as hype goes, though, what is the single game that you are most looking forward to getting your hands on? Irrelevant of release date, irrelevant of like if you saw gameplay. Is there any one game that you're really looking forward to just playing, just popping in your console, downloading as soon as it comes out?
I don't know. I think the one I'm looking forward to definitely the most would be. I would say it's like maybe like a 3 or like 4-way tie between like Cyberpunk, Doom Eternal, and then like Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then this indie game from Annapurna Interactive called Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Okay.
It's one of those ones where I don't even know how to explain it. Just like look up a trailer for it on YouTube.
Okay.
It's like an interactive like pop album, and
that's
it's
cool.
like some levels have you like on like a skateboard riding around collecting these hearts, and then you move to like another level where you're on like a motorcycle, and then it moves to like a fighting game almost with like quick time events, and it's just like playing that demo it like blew my mind.
That's bonkers. That's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't have like one definitive like favorite from the show. It's just more like kind of like a tie between a couple.
Yeah, that's fair. And I it's nice to hear an indie game on your list because obviously, I mean, everyone's ready for Cyberpunk. I'm ready to get that as soon as it comes out. Doom Eternal, Final Fantasy, but I'm right there with you. I saw a lot of really cool, kind of like tantalizing indie offers. Personally, I've got my eyes on Annapurna as well because at the Microsoft presser, they debuted the trailer for 12 Minutes, which that one really cool. Captivate me, I think, in a way that a lot of other narratives don't. And I think that if they can do it right, what we saw of 12 Minutes was really, really interesting. I just want to see more. So personally, that's high on my list as well. And Annapurna is not a developer I'm incredibly familiar with, so it's cool to see them really making a big appearance at E3 with a couple of games.
Yeah, it was really cool to just see like a different. Like a little bit more like variety, and seeing a smaller publisher like that get kind of a place to show their stuff off.
Of course, yeah. No, I think that is what Microsoft is also allowing a lot of its studios to do by making its big acquisitions this year. But thank you so much for joining me, David. I really appreciate the time. One last question for you: if you had to pick one winner in the entire E3, who would it be? Who do you think had the best conference? Who do you think, quote unquote, won this E3?
That's a trick question. I don't know if mine will be particularly well. I don't know. I mean, I always just go maybe just back to like maybe like Xbox partly because I mean I guess still the hype of being there, but also it seems like they're very much going for keeping their word with showing off just a diverse array of games that
absolutely
like anyone watching that stream can at least there's at least maybe one or two things that you can pick out of that conference and be like I want to play that. So I think there was just so much variety of both the AAA stuff like the Cyberpunks and the Halo Infinites of the world, but also just the smaller games like 12 Minutes and a bunch of others I can't think of right now, but definitely Xbox because they just had a wider variety of like games to like show off on their stage.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they had such variety. They had something for the AAA crowd. They had so many offerings for the indie crowd and both new and old titles. I definitely see where you're coming from. And like you said, the excitement of being there and seeing Keanu at the Cyberpunk reveal couldn't have hurt.
And can't deny Nintendo either because their first party lineup is insane.
No, they made a stellar showing this year for sure.
So crazy. But yeah, definitely Xbox, but Nintendo, at least for me, is like a close second.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. I totally agree with you. Well, thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast. Hopefully we'll have you on some more. But this E3 discussion was a perfect little insight into the conference that I unfortunately missed out on. Thank you so much, David Gill, everyone. I've been Jacob Smith. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.